And you know, I was really kind of nervous coming up here because it was kind of a last minute slam together today. Everything's falling apart, nothing's quite going right, everything's going, so I grabbed my shirt. I had this nice pretty blue shirt, it's a nice dress shirt, and I normally have it set aside for these kind of things because, you know, you want to look nice, you know? And so I have this one, which doesn't look bad, but I grabbed it off the rack, and, you know, normally I have everything. I couldn't find my blue shirt to save my life. And I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking, I can't find it, so I grabbed this one and I start ironing it real quick, and I kept, so I'm asking the kids, do you smell anything? No, Dad, it smells fine. Hey, I used to ask my wife, hey, hon, you smell anything? No, it smells fine. So, but I kept smelling something on the shirt, so I'm like getting all paranoid about it. It's like, no, it's just me. Nobody else smells it. It's my imagination. I got to get this going. You know, I'm already a little behind it. So I get going, and then I put it on. You know, you jump in the shower, do your thing, and I come out. I put everything on. Do it. I'm still smelling something. So I come out and, like, you know, asking all my kids and my wife, hey, smell me. Come on. Am I okay? Am I okay here? And things were fine. I don't smell. I hope I don't. Either that or everybody's being very polite. But it was one of those things. It comes up, it's a nice normal day, and then everything falls apart. Mm-hmm. Everything goes off the rails, and it's just, what? Where did that come from? What is that? It's that weird smell. Sometimes it's a weird sound in your car. I had a car scream at me as it drove past on the interstate up here. It made some kind of high-pitched sound going through. Never heard anything like it. It's the unexpected that makes life interesting. You know, as the library says, it's off the beaten path. It's one of those things, it's like, where did this come from? And sometimes we can plan on it. Sometimes we know what's going on. Sometimes it's, oh yeah, I've heard that story, I do this. It's engineered. Just as I hit the button by accident. See, the unexpected hits us all the time. So this is Riverside Cemetery. This is the Black Angel of Riverside Cemetery. It's a Moline. Now I know all this is local. This is the only thing we're going to go across the river for. But it's one of those local legends that I absolutely love. This is the grave of Charles Deere. He was the son of John Deere. And they were making a lot of money by that time, so they could have cool memorials like this. And it's a big cross, and they put up a nice metallic angel statue there, and she's looking down at the grave of John Deere and being all sweet and sorrowful and all like that. It's a cool statue. Well, over the years, stories started to come up about the statue. All kinds of things. Allegedly, a girl was out there one night. This is just one story. Allegedly, a girl was out there one night, and her friends had dared her to stay out there the entire night, but if she did past midnight, then a hand would reach up from the grave and grab her and bring her down. Well, she didn't believe it, so they have one of those cool schoolyard fights. Is not, well, I'll prove it. So they dare her, and she goes out there, and she's at this site, right? And she's there in the middle of the night, and she hears something, and she spooks herself out because she's getting a little tired, and things are getting a little dark, and things are a little freaky, because you're telling yourself all these stories in your head, and you go through, and all of a sudden, she can't move. It's like something has a hold of her foot, and she can't go. And she starts freaking out and totally panicking. The story is that people came out the next day, and they found her there, scared to death. She had gotten her coat caught on a tree branch, and she couldn't move.
And she scared herself to death.
Exactly. That's the story. Now, this story is not only all across the state of Iowa, but all across the United States. It pops up time and time again. It's one of those great instances of one story being applied to different things. Now, the coolest and the most prevalent legend about the Black Angel was if you go up there after midnight, and if you kiss the Black Angel or you even touch it, then you'll die within 24 hours. It's one of those things. So, my grandparents, when they got together back in the 1950s, my grandfather lived north of Long Grove up here. He grew up out there. And he takes my grandma to the Black Angel statue. And he dares her to kiss it. And he basically cajoles her and pushes her into it, and so she does. they were still married 40 years later.
Okay.
So it's one of those great things. It's a great story because it kind of scares you. It makes you interested.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also one of those things that you're a young couple. It's nice, it's quiet, it's dark. Well, let's go out to the Black Angel. You've seen the Black Angel, haven't you? And look, even convenient stairs to sit on right there. Here, you're getting a little scared here. You can scoot in a little closer. You can, yeah, that's okay, I'll protect you. It's one of those things. And so it became like that, and all kinds of people went up there. It was a cool spot for the teenagers to go out to for years and years and years and years and years. But the legends grew, and the legend perpetuated. Partly because of that. And then the deer finally got sick of it about the 1970s and they had it removed. And it now sits out at a rehab center in New Mexico.
Oh.
So when you go there now, it's just a cross. But the Black Angel still exists. To my knowledge, it hasn't killed anybody yet.
What did the deer family say when the angel was removed?
They removed it, so they were happy about it. It wasn't anybody else that did it. They chose to remove it because they were tired of people up there. And then there started being vandalism and things like that. And they were just tired of people hanging out in their graves and it being a cool makeout spot for teenagers.
How can a cemetery be a cool makeout spot?
I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah.
So at any rate, so you have these kind of places. You have those kind of legends. They're a legend with a purpose. They're a safe legend.
Right.
But still, the unexplained happens, well, when you least expect it. This here is Summit Church. Yes.
Is there any, I don't know who asked questions. Is there?
Yeah, that's fine. I generally save questions for the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. I apologize.
No, it's fine. I generally ask questions at the end. Take all my questions at the end. You can ask as many as you want.
Perfect.
All right, so we have Summit Church. This is down on Utica Ridge Road. Mm-hmm. If you go straight over from here and then you turn right into Bettendorf, there's the church right there. It used to be a church founded in the 1860s, decommissioned in 1974. A few years ago, I was doing some work for the Scott County Historical Society in going through Summit Church's old records at a church over in Arvin. And I'm going through and it's just lists of meeting minutes. And I can't remember what circle of friends, circle of knitting, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of churchy stuff. And I'm going through and I find this story. And one night in the early 1900s, this group met. And they were all local people, so they rode their horses up, they walked down. It was a nice summer night, and they met, they had their meeting, and then they went home. And across the field, as they went down the roads towards home, they could see these lights, almost like somebody had a lantern going down one of the creeks. There was nobody that lived down there. They couldn't see anyone. They didn't know anybody that was there. Nobody answered them when they called out. It was just a light out there for no reason. And they couldn't figure out what's going on. And nobody could figure out who was down there. And they asked later, was anybody down there? Some cow get loose, livestock down there, something like that? No, nobody was down there. But still, there was a light going down the creek bed. Another person claimed to see in a grove of trees, horses riding into the grove of trees and then out of the grove of trees. And then they disappear. And then they reappear somewhere else. And so they're all over in there and they couldn't figure it out. And they thought, well, maybe it's just disappearing behind something. No, they would go in, vanish, and then reappear somewhere else and just in and out of this grove. Well, in the meeting minutes, somebody had written, Lucille, what did you put in that lemonade last night? They had no idea what it was, and they did what most of us do. We laugh it off. Something weird happens, we can't explain it, we laugh it off, and we move on. It's a weird light, I don't know what it was, she must have spiked the lemonade. And we go on, but the stories persist. Now, some legends are known to everybody. Like this guy, Bigfoot. One of the most controversial things of all time. Possibly more controversial than ghosts. Everybody can kind of see, they can blur the lines with ghosts a little bit. Bigfoot is a little more yes or no. There's no way. And then you move it to Iowa. Normally Bigfoot's associated with the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachian Mountains, along the Appalachian Trail, all through there, where it's a little more remote, there's a lot more woods, there's more places to hide. You can kind of pretend, even if you don't believe, it's like, well, maybe, at least it's a place where a guy in a monkey suit can go ahead and dress up and they can disappear back in the weeds somewhere. And they're gone. And it's good. Iowa? Where are you gonna hide in Iowa? It's a cornfield, man. Maybe if the corn's up, they can sneak through. We had a 500-pound male black bear go through 2 years ago. Everybody knew where this thing was at, and everybody saw where it was. There were people stopping on the roads wanting to get a picture of the black bear. I'm surprised nobody got eaten. But still, you knew where it was. There are stories. There are at least 10 different sightings in a 30-year period, 40-year period, of Bigfoot in areas around here. One's in Hampton. There's actually 2 separate ones right here in Eldridge, believe it or not. Well, one's near Eldridge. One was right in the city. In the early 80s, a man claimed that when he was on his newspaper route, there was something following him between the houses. Yeah, I know. It's okay. I feel the same way, I'm sure. And I'm looking at it now, I am old enough to remember Eldridge in the early 80s, and I'm thinking, there's not much here. Where are you hiding outside of there? I'm pretty sure I would have seen a big fuzzy guy walking around. I don't know. But still, he claims it. Maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't. I don't know. That's all we can know. However, I used to spend a lot of time in the Wapsie Bottoms growing up. And there's all kinds of weird places down there, little nooks and crannies and things, and you can go for miles and never be seen. You can hear things going on around you. You can hear neighboring farms and things, but you don't see anybody. And that sound travels, so they're a good 4 or 5 miles. I used to hear my grandparents' farm was 2 or 3 miles away from the interstate, and I could hear cars going down the road plain as day. No problem. And I was a mile or 2 from anybody. So there was an individual who claimed that he was out camping somewhere along the Wapsie in, I think it was the early 80s or so, and he was originally from Maine. He was a big outdoors guy. He liked to hunt, fish, all that kind of good stuff, right? So he had been in the outdoors quite a bit. He was familiar with wildlife, he was familiar with creatures in different areas as well as here. So he was an experienced woodsman. And him and his girlfriend spent all day fishing and whatever else, and they decided, it's getting dark, let's go to bed. So they crawl in their tent, and sometime later, he hears something moving across their campsite. And he hears footsteps, and he hears something grunting. And he's like, what is that? And at first, he thinks, well, maybe it's a bear. It's like, there's no bears in Iowa. And he's sitting there, and he's listening, and he's starting to get this kind of weird feeling, like something's off. Something's not right here. And he's listening to this grunting, and it doesn't sound down low, like somebody's pig or maybe a cow or something. I've run across all kinds of cows down in the bottoms. You come across, some farmer runs their cows down there, and hey, there's a cow, But it didn't sound low. It sounded way up high. And he's like, what is making that sound? But he didn't, for the life of me, he couldn't make himself open that tent flap and look outside. Because something was bothering him about it. And it kind of grunted its way through, and there were big, heavy footprints, like boom, 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 like something heavy walking across the grass. And he just stayed in there, and he stayed real quiet, and then pretty soon it left. And they got up the next day, and they got out of it. That was enough for him. He said he didn't find any footprints or anything, but he's like, for the life of me, I can't figure out what that was. But the Bigfoot Research Organization, yes, there's organizations for this stuff, they said that, yeah, that's a legitimate sighting. It matches other sightings we've had in the area. There's been sightings in Hampton. There's been sightings, I talked to a local guy who said he swore up and down. He was in the Wapsie, or he was fishing down there, and he was by himself. His friends went up to Some of you guys remember this. He went up to Dells up here in Eldridge, or they went up there, and he wanted to keep fishing. So it was getting dark, and he's there by himself, and something lands in the middle of the river. Like, boom! Like some big rock got thrown in the river. He's like, what the heck was that? And he was looking around, and he can't see anything. What was that? And so he goes back to fishing, maybe a tree branch fell off or something. And so he goes back to fishing, and things get quiet, and then all of a sudden, boom! Another big one right out in the middle of the river. And it sounded like somebody was throwing big rocks out in the middle of the river. And finally he had enough. He's like, I don't know what it is. I'm getting out of here. So he grabbed his stuff, and what was great is that he had to walk half a mile out through the woods in order to get back to his car. That was a thrill ride, let me tell you what. So he gets back there, takes off. Now, according to Bigfoot lore, and according to researchers and investigators and whatever else, there are several stories of Bigfoot, big feet, throwing rocks at people that they don't want around. They don't show themselves, but they throw rocks and maybe vocalize, scream, yell, grunt, whatever it is. So once again, this guy's story, he said, I'm not saying it's Bigfoot, but I don't know what was heavy, what was big enough to throw something that size out in the middle of the river like that. One of the prevailing theories is that Bigfoot migrates through the area. They don't live around here. I mean, let's face it, somebody's going to see it. You're going to see a black bear, somebody's going to see Bigfoot, The prevailing theory amongst experts, as expert as you can be in Bigfoot, you have groups in the Pacific Northwest, or they're in the Appalachian Mountains, wherever they're at, and they migrate between the two every few years or so. Now, I used to work with a guy, and he swore up and down. We work in a fairly rural area, and he swore up and down he saw a cougar go up over this barrier one night. And he was an older guy, and his eyesight wasn't so great. And I'll be honest with you, we made fun of him. I was like, there's no cougars around here, man. Just calm down. You're good, man. You didn't, I don't think you saw what you saw. It could have been a big raccoon, could have been a cat. I'm telling you, I know what I saw. I saw a cougar. And it went on for like a year or two. And it wasn't like a constant thing, and it was good natured. It's like, it's dark, you're tired, we understand. But he swore up and down, this is what I saw. And then, on the nightly news, DNR comes out, and they have a trail cam set up, and it's a cougar walking through the Clinton County woods in its annual migrating pattern that they've done for years. And apparently they've done it all the time. I've never seen one, I grew up in the Wapsie Bottoms and in the woods of the area. I've never heard of cougar coming through here. But the DNR was saying, yeah, they come through here every so often. It's usually an annual migratory pattern, tracking through. Never seen one, never heard one, never seen any prints, never known anybody that have been through those woods that ever seen anything like it. But there it is on trail cam, and you can see it plain as day as it walks by. There is no hint, there is no mistake. It's a cougar. Yeah, I had to eat a lot of crow with Marty for a long time after that. It's like, and then it becomes completely viable. It's like, it might have been a cougar. I don't know. It was there. Now, Bigfoot, I don't know. I have a lot of skepticism about Bigfoot. I mean, yeah, it could be in the Wapsie Bottoms. Yeah, it could migrate, it could go through. I don't know. But when you're out there in the woods, and away from civilization, even a little bit, even a mile or two, all of a sudden things seem a little different. It's like, I don't know, it's not as safe. Things seem more possible when you're out there. And all of a sudden, those stories of Bigfoot that you were laughing at in your living room or maybe at the corner bar over a couple of beers with your friends, all of a sudden it's like, man, I don't know, maybe. And if it is, I don't want to run into it out here because, Bigfoot walked into a bar, really? Come on. Not going to happen. But when you're out in the backwoods and you're out there away from everything, all of a sudden it's like, man, what do I do if something comes up? That's not so funny. That's not a cool idea anymore. And all of a sudden, all those stories aren't as cool. But let's face it, are we ever going to really run into a Bigfoot? Maybe. I don't know. You can keep an open mind with it. But far more likely, you're going to find things off the beaten path that are a lot more mundane. Let's take this guy, for instance. It's not the best picture. It looked crystal clear on the computer when I downloaded it, and then I put it up here on the big screen. I'm going to have to invest in a projector so I can check this stuff. This is very frustrating. This is William Bettendorf, Bettendorf's namesake. Now, a lot of people are aware of Joseph Bettendorf. Joseph Bettendorf has the really cool house. It's a school now. It sits over there off Sunset Drive in Bettendorf, right up on the bluff. Really cool English manor style house. Got all cool woodwork and stairs and stuff.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And he was president of the Bettendorf Company for 30 years. Well, people don't remember so much William. William was his older brother. William was he was a prolific inventor. He had over 100 patents to his name with over 15 to 20 pending when he died in 1910.
Wow.
Now, William was a man with a vision. William wasn't one of those inventors that came up with stuff from scratch, you know. It wasn't like, I invented the light bulb, I invented the car. It wasn't like that. He took something and he had it, this could be better. And he started off with a plow. And he added hydraulics. He had a real mind for hydraulics and hydraulic technology. And so he takes it and he added hydraulics to this plow and he made it easier for farmers to use. Well, he kept the patent for it. He was out in Peru, Illinois, up by close to the LaSalle area there. And he worked for a factory there. He was a plant manager. He comes up with that and they're like, we really like your idea. We want to manufacture that. And so that was the start of his journey. So he starts with a plow. And they start manufacturing out there. Then he comes up with an idea of, well, metal wheels. Now, metal wheels were in existence back, this is probably the later 1800s, probably 1870s, 1880s-ish. They were in existence, but they looked almost like bicycle tires. They were really weird. They had a big flat metal rim like this, or a tread like that. They were metal. And then they had the hub, the center part of the wheel. And then they had like bicycle spokes coming off of that. Well, the problem is that most of the companies were welding these spokes right at the surface, right here. So pretty soon, you know, one snaps. So one snap's no big deal. Well, you go over a year and all kinds of them snap and all of a sudden your wheel's falling off, you can't use it anymore. And it wasn't like now, you know, where you come across, I mean, heck, you go out to most farms, they got a welder on farm. Hey, we can go ahead, we can do this. Not so much back then. So it was a big industrial process. So William looked at it and said, you know what, I can do that. So he came up with a way to make it more durable, to make it last longer. And he had a process where it was welded inside the hub and screwed in tight. And so the process of breaking down took a heck of a lot longer and lasted so much longer. And people loved it. Revolutionized the way metal wheels were looked at. Made all kinds of things more viable. So we did that. That put him on the ticket. Well, the company out in Peru, they were cool enough to say, you know, change their name from the Peru Plow Company to the Peru Plow and Wheel Company, but he had all kinds of ideas and processes for improving the manufacturing process. Hydraulics and foundries and all kinds of cool stuff. Well, he didn't want to do any of that. So he's like, you know what, I own the patent. He took his toys and he went to Davenport with his brother. And he ended up here, and he started with the biggest factory in Davenport to begin with. And then in the early 1900s, about 1902, there were a series of 2 fires. One happened in January, wrecked a lot of this plant, just burned it to cinders. So he gets insurance money, they were kind of touch and go. He gets the insurance money to rebuild, they have all the materials on site. That May, a bigger fire breaks out and almost bankrupts him. But he's still got loans, he's got things. He's persuaded to move to Bettendorf. Then it was Gilbert, or Gilbert Town, depending on which map you look at. Mostly it was Gilbert, is what it meant. So it's a small town. It's out in the middle of nowhere back then. There was nothing in between pretty much the East Village of Davenport and what would be downtown Bettendorf now. There was nothing out there. It was woods. About where the old I-74 bridge ran. You ran into the first town, which was Lilienthal, and then you ran into Gilbert on the other side, and by that time we kind of grown into each other, and it was kind of a funky thing. and it gets confusing. People argue all the time. It's not worth the time. But he moves to Gilbert. He builds a giant factory down in the riverfront, some of which the buildings are still there if you know where to look. Builds a huge thing, becomes amazingly successful. He's got more room to build. Builds out, then he finds the Bettendorf truck, which was a railroad part, which is more durable. Does the same thing for the railroad cars that the metal wheel did for wagons and all kinds of other agricultural equipment. It goes nuts. He goes international. He's making these things all over the world. He gets a foundry built. He keeps investing in his factory. Well, things are going really well for him, and he wants to show off his wealth. Now, William always had a stint towards the business, and William had this whole thing, I'm going to build a mansion. And his idea was, now back then, there's nothing up on the river bluff. Now Bettendorf's all built up in there. There's nothing out there. Absolutely nothing. It's woods. So he buys a 25-acre parcel of land, pretty much buys the river bluff. And he decides, I'm going to build a mansion up there to show off how wealthy I am. And it's going to have the best of everything. It's going to have custom woodwork. It's going to have custom made furniture from Europe. It's going to have all this great stuff. And it's going to be right there. It's going to be awesome. And he comes up with an idea for a house that looks a lot like this. This is the W.P. Bettendorf Engine. It sits, if you know where the, Okay, well keep that in mind. Oh, we're back. Okay, so we have the William Bettendorf Engine here. On the outside, it's this new Spanish revival style, which was really popular out in LA and stuff. Inside, it's all Bavarian wood style, like this.
Wow.
As you can tell, all of this was handmade. He had craftsmen imported from Europe, and I'm not kidding. He basically imported craftsmen from Europe, built them houses in Bettendorf. Thinking because by that time, the city had changed its name from Gilbert to Bettendorf in his honor. And had to make him a house. And it's got all kinds of cool stuff. It had over 20 rooms. It sat on 24 acres of land, which he started landscaping. And most of it was gardens. There was a racetrack at one point. There's all kinds of cool stuff. So in the process of building, and while they're doing it, and this is all oak. This is actually the whitest oak staircase in the Quad Cities. I guess they couldn't make it cool enough for anywhere else, so it's like, well, we're not the biggest, we're not the tallest, we'll be the whitest staircase. You know, they gotta claim something with a house like this, you know? So, about 1908, he meets this lady, Elizabeth Stady. Elizabeth Stady works down at the Peterson building, the Peterson department store downtown. It's the Redstone Room now. This beautiful Redstone building. He meets her, and they fall in love, they get married, and they settle in, and they start building the house together. She has a lot of input. They go on these big traveling, buying tours through Europe. Well, in 1910, he suddenly gets really sick out of clear blue sky, and he drops dead. 53 years old. What's going on? So that's the first part of kind of the weird, tragic history of this house. He never saw it completed. He never lived in it. He died next door. They had built a bungalow next door that they were living in and overseeing construction. He could walk down to the factory, which was right down at the bottom of the hill, and then he could walk back up and he could just look across the street and see how they were building his house. And he was very hands-on. He was very particular in what he wanted to do. Well, Elizabeth Stady is left a widow with a 20-some-odd-year-old son who was pretty much maintaining life on his own. He was coming into his own. He had actually worked for Williams' company. By that point, he was doing very well. He was very successful. And so she gets special permission. She inherits a fortune from William. And she's pretty much set for life. And so they get special permission to finish the house. And she is the first one to live in the house. So all the furnishings and everything were hers. And she lives in there for the next 14 years. And she started doing cool things. She would invite, her first husband left her.